Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this measure today. Sometimes the rationale for a bill is difficult to discern. Other times like this, it's a bit easier to understand and a bit more obvious too. To even the casual observer, school district electioneering has become an increasingly common event, and I'd like to provide you some evidence to substantiate that point. Included in the handouts that are being passed to you right now are a cover sheet along with 4 articles. The first is a relatively new TPPF study that documents 9 separate instances of electioneering that were observed in the fall and spring of 2024. The next 2 are TPPF commentaries that spotlight 13 other examples of bad behavior. And the last is an article written by a local writer that I actually don't often agree with on Twitter, but I thought he did a fine job of capturing some very questionable signage at Austin ISD during their last Vader. Now, I don't have time to walk you through all 24 examples, but I did create a cover sheet, and that contains excerpts of the items that you've been provided. As you'll see, there's a lot of alarming activity afoot. Now, if I were asked which of those 24 items were the most egregious, what I would point to is on pages 7 and 9 of your study, there is a situation highlighted involving Turkey Kitakü ISD. And as you'll see, it's very easy to observe that this district was engaged in electioneering because they have pictures of kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders holding signage urging passage of Prop A. So I hope that information is compelling, and I hope you look favorably on this measure.
All right, members, any questions for Mr. Quintero? Yes, Vice Chair Bernal.
I'm assuming you're familiar with the bill because you've probably seen it in both chambers.
Yes, sir.
I just want to be clear. I understand the electioneering part as it pertains to political candidates.
Yes, sir.
And I understand the electioneering part as it might pertain to something on the ballot. Does that also apply if they take a policy position on something that may not be up for a public vote, but is a position on something otherwise?
It's a very good question, sir.
And I'll tell you why I'm
Yes, sir.
asking, just so we're on the same page literally. If you go to the back of this page that you passed out,
Yes, sir.
there's a number 3 under Alamo Heights. They're talking about vouchers, which there wasn't up. I mean, it's a topic of public conversation, but there's not a candidate, there's not a ballot measure. It's their position on a general policy. And I'm wondering if that's a violation as well.
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Vice Chairman. The instances spotlighted in this cover sheet, I think, largely relate to the bill, but perhaps not in whole. So the number 3 that's highlighted there perhaps is something that would fall outside the bounds of the bill, but it's still something that I think is worth noting.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is I think that we need to make sure that districts understand what is and is not inside or outside the bounds. Because if we don't want them to encourage people to vote one way or another for something or for someone, that's one thing. But if now we're saying that they can't comment on topics of public conversation that are in the air, then we're essentially limiting their ability to talk about anything, like tariffs, for example, right?
So I think it's the manner in which it's done, right? So if you come to the legislature and you say, hey, this is a good bill, this is a bad bill, that's one thing. But if you use public resources to blast the community to lobby against a measure, I think that's a different matter.
I think the point I'm trying to make, and we can talk about it later, but
Yes,
I don't want to confuse electioneering, which is asking people to vote for or against someone or something, versus being able to talk about something that's in the public space.
Yeah.
That might be associated with one party or person. But at that point, they won't be able to talk about anything happening in the world.
And I think that's a fair point, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Hinojosa.
Thank you, Chairman. There was a Denton principal who was indicted for illegal electioneering. So isn't this already illegal?
So those were civil penalties levied against the district. The individuals, my understanding is the individuals largely got away scot-free. So what this bill would seek to do is impose criminal penalties so that there's at least a more powerful disincentive in place.
Okay, well, the story I'm reading in the Texas Tribune that I pulled up with a quick search says the actual principals were indicted. So I would like us to look at whether there's already criminal penalties for this. I know this story got widespread publicity within the education community, scared a lot of people who work for our schools. And so there is already a belief that this behavior is illegal, and I want to make sure we're just not.
One thing I would
duplicating
refer you
that.
to is the Stevens decision, which effectively disempowered the Texas Attorney General from being able to seek criminal penalties against bad actors.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, the Stevens decision reached a few years ago by, I believe it was the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals, decided that the Attorney General did not have proper enforcement authority to seek electioneering-related criminal penalties.
When was that?
I believe this was in 22, perhaps 23. I'd have to go back. I can get you that answer, though.
Okay, but these principals were indicted after that. So I just want us to
Sure.
look into and make sure we're not duplicating efforts here.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Bryant.
Mr. Quintero, this piece of paper that you gave us here contains references to school districts and alleged behavior. Who put this together?
I did.
Okay. I noticed that next to each school district name, you have a paragraph to the right of it there, and they are in quotes. Who are they quoting?
The various documents that you've been provided, so I didn't want to just flood you with paperwork. I wanted to pull out the most important items of information, and then, as you'll see on the far right column, there's the actual page number or paragraph number from which it's derived.
So, source in the right-hand corner says source, page number one, page number. What's the source?
So if you look at the top, sir, there's a hyperlink title at the very top of each differently colored box, and that corresponds with one of the documents that you've been provided.
A hyperlink title?
Yeah, and of course, it only works in electronic format, but yes. So if you look at the very top, there's a bolded, italicized title above each differently colored box. So for the blue one, it'd be thumb on the scale, and that would correspond with this document here.
And who produced this document?
I did, sir, over the interim.
So you're quoting yourself in here. In other words, you've put quotation marks around these statements that makes this look authoritative, but the quotation marks are coming from a document that you wrote.
Well, sir, I have 2 minutes to provide you with 24 examples. This document alone is 20 pages. I didn't figure I'd have enough time to properly communicate all that needed to be communicated. So what I wanted to do is provide you with a handy excerpt sheet that would
Well,
pull
that's
out the
fine.
most important information.
I'm just asking about those quotation marks, which typically indicate they came from some reliable source. They didn't come from some third-party reliable source. They just came from you expressing your opinion about what went on in these districts. These districts are not here to explain for themselves what happened. And so I just want to make the point, these quotation marks are not quoting litigation, they're not quoting newspapers, they're not quoting anybody but you. So
Well, sir, if you look at the back page here,
yeah,
I've got another chart in this fuller document that actually quotes from each court case involving each of the 7 different school districts that were sued by the Texas Attorney General. So all of my documentation properly sources what needs to be sourced, and if you have any comments on that, I'm happy to engage with you on the quality of my academic work.
This is not academic work.
Thanks.
All right, Chairman Dutton.
Thank you. Have there been any convictions for electioneering by school board members?
No, sir, not to my knowledge. And again, I would point you back to the Stevens case, which effectively disempowered the Attorney General from enforcing state law. Local prosecutors have been reluctant to.
But local prosecutors could prosecute these cases,
Yes, sir.
right? And to your knowledge, has any local prosecutor prosecuted any of these cases?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Do you have an opinion why they have not?
I have many opinions, but in this case, I think there's too many variables at stake to really properly offer a reasonable justification for their lack of enforcement.
Okay, but you don't think it was that the facts weren't there to support the claim of electioneering?
I think there are plenty of facts there to support the claims. The reluctance may be due to a variety of different factors, though. It's one reason why we've been so vocal about the legislature moving to re-empower the Attorney General and give him proper enforcement authority so that matters like this can be properly dealt with.
But that belies the fact that the local DAs do have authority to do it, and they haven't done it, and haven't chosen to do it, and yet they're the people we empower locally to apply, to pursue claims where people violate the law.
And I think that's a reasonable argument. What I would also suggest, though, is if the legislature is going to pass laws, it has a stake in making sure that they are enforced. And so the Attorney General is, I believe, a proper venue for the enforcement of those laws if and when local officials refuse to act.
Well, we could debate that all day, but I'm wondering, have you talked to any local prosecutors about why they haven't done this?
Me personally, no, sir, but I know our foundation is, our Right on Crime team in particular is very connected into that space, and I'm sure they have.
Okay, but they haven't shared with you what the conversations was, or discussions, or conclusions were?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Members, any more questions for this witness? And we do have a resource witness from the Attorney General's office. Any member would like to hear from them. All right. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.